Chapter 506, The Weather Museum. Klein already had a basic understanding of Danitz's character, so he didn't take the initiative to ask about the legends. He continued sitting in his chair and calmly looked at him. Danitz, who hadn't been interrupted, shook his head.
Legend has it that 300 years ago, when the Loan army first occupied this island, more than 500 soldiers mysteriously disappeared after a fog. Not long after that, a lot of bones appeared by the beach and on the mountain, and similar incidents happened several times. This continued until the Church of Storms built a cathedral here and sent a bishop.
Although historians accredited the official start of the colonial era to when Roselle sent a fleet to find a safe route to the southern continent, in reality, for a long period of time before that, the countries of the northern continent had explored the surrounding seas and gradually colonized a few islands. The only difference was that these operations weren't systematic or wide-scale enough.
Disappearing mysterious in the fog, bones appearing by the beach and on the mountains.
Klein thought of the forsaken land of God for some baffling reason.
According to Little Sun's description, there was no sun there, with only lightning and the night. Furthermore, when humans were surrounded by darkness without a sliver of light, they would encounter strange or terrifying events.
Looking at the lighthouse that stood out in the setting sun, Danitz continued,
And according to the tombs and murals excavated on the island, the natives here seem to have a tradition of cannibalism. This island experiences intense weather changes, making it often encounter earthquakes, storms, and heavy fog. Thus, the natives experience disasters time and time again. In order to survive, they began worshipping a god of weather they created for themselves. Every year they would hold 4 rituals. The rituals involve killing chosen worshippers as they shared in the blood and flesh before burying the worshippers' heads in the sacrificial altar. However, a similar tradition has long since been replaced by the storm sacrificial ritual, and the original language of the natives has also disappeared.
God of Weather, a conquered island that had once retained the tradition of live sacrifices.
Klein made his preliminary judgment. Danitz retracted his gaze and casually said,
Because of these legends, there are 2 unique customs in Bansy Harbor. One is to close the door tightly on nights with heavy fog or huge changes in weather. They don't head out or respond to any knocking. The other is that they love the blood of all kinds of animals and have learned from migrating elves to add salt, solidifying the blood into strange lumps which are tender and fragrant when matched with the acrid condiments native to this land.
Isn't that blood cake?
Klein was stunned for a second, his eyebrows furrowing in puzzlement.
Elves?
According to the stereotypes he had formed in his previous life, elves were supposed to be elegant vegetarians. How could they research the correct method for eating blood, as well as the 100 methods involved in making blood cakes?
That's right. Rumor has it that many elves like solidified blood.
Danitz spread out his hands in response.
Unfortunately, it's already very difficult to find such creatures who have good culinary skills.
Little Sun previously mentioned that the ancient god of the elves, Elf King, Soniathram, wielded the authority of the storm. In that case, the elves should be a race equivalent to Beyonders of the Sailor Pathway. So it's not inconceivable that elves enjoy blood-related food. Perhaps they even possess the attribute of being irritable as well. That's quite a scene to behold.
Klein's thoughts raced, and he gradually turned his attention to blood cakes.
It's been a while since I ate that.
He suddenly had the urge to alight from the ship and taste the delicacy. At this moment, Danitz took the initiative to suggest,
There's a green lemon restaurant here that's very famous. Pig blood is especially delicious. Do you want to try it out?
He kept having the feeling that being alone in the same room with Gehrman Sparrow was very dangerous. He was worried that this monster in human skin would suddenly go crazy.
He should be more restrained in places with more people. Holy Lord of Storms, I hope this trip comes to an end as soon as possible.
Danitz prayed without confidence. As a pirate, he also believed in the Lord of Storms, but he didn't have enough respect for the church. After hearing Blazing's suggestion, Klein, who already had such intentions, was immediately moved. However, The legends and customs Danitz had told him of made him feel a little uncomfortable. Thus, he took out a gold coin and performed a divination right in front of Danitz. The result was that there were no dormant dangers in Bansy Harbor for him. Klein looked at the gold coin in his hand without moving his eyes away for a few seconds. He still felt uneasy. As Danitz watched this scene, he suddenly understood that this monster in front of him was skilled in divination.
Even if I were to secretly flee, it would still be very easy for him to find me.
Blazing felt a wave of depression as a faint sadness welled up in his heart. He had just recovered from his disconsolate mood when Klein suddenly stood up and walked over to the washroom. Before closing the door, Klein expressionlessly turned his head around and said,
"You can use this opportunity to escape."
With that, Klein slammed the washroom's door. Danitz spread his hands open and clenched them tightly, took 2 steps towards the door before coming to a halt. The unknown was the scariest. He didn't dare take the risk of creating conflict before he had any clear understanding of Gehrman Sparrow's beyonder powers.
At least he's kind enough to me and hasn't actually hurt me. He'll likely let me go when we get to Byam.
Danitz's hopes of him getting lucky had taken hold of his mind in the washroom. Klein pulled out a paper figurine, disguised it, and took 4 steps counterclockwise to head above the gray fog. He sat down at the end of the long bronze table, removed the pendulum from his left wrist, and wrote the corresponding divination statement.
There is danger dormant in Bansy Harbor.
He hung his spirit pendulum and adjusted his posture. After muttering a few times, Klein opened his eyes and saw the topaz pendant rotating clockwise. Furthermore, it was with a high amplitude and frequency. This meant that for Klein, there was a great danger lurking in Bansy Harbor.
How could this be? This place was colonized by the kingdom for more than 300 years, and it has become an important port on the main trading route for over 100 years. There have never been any rumors of danger being spread. Could it be that several powerful pirates are cooperating to sack this port? No, those cannons defending the port aren't for show.
Klein frowned, performing another divination on whether he would encounter any pirate-related mishaps, but the answer was no. He fell silent for a few seconds. Then he allowed his spirituality to envelop his body before plummeting through the gray fog. Returning to the real world, Klein pressed the mechanical button on the toilet, put away the paper figurine double, and went to the nearby washing basin to wet his hands with water. In this short period of time, he quickly sorted out his thoughts and decided to do his best to hide. His priority was to stay safe. Pulling out a tissue and wiping his hands, Klein opened the door and saw that Danitz was still standing in the middle of the living room.
A pirate who's cautious to the point of being a little cowardly. In a sense, Vice Admiral Iceberg's subordinates are all adventurers who are part-time pirates.
Klein looked at him and calmly said,
"To the first-class dining room."
All right.
Danitz didn't understand why Gehrman Sparrow had suddenly changed his mind, but in the end, he chose to not raise any disputes. Walking down the gangway, Cleves suddenly said to Donna and the others,
"Head to Green Lemon Restaurant first. I have some matters to do with Captain Elland. I'll join you soon."
All right.
Although Erty Branch was surprised, he wasn't too puzzled. Cleves was halfway aboard the ship when he met Elland with his straight sword at his waist.
"I'm going to visit Gehrman Sparrow."
Cleves turned around for the first-class cabins after saying that. Elland was momentarily dazed, unable to understand his out-of-the-blue intentions.
"There's no need to inform me that you're visiting Gehrman Sparrow."
Elland was startled for 2 seconds before he vaguely grasped the true meaning behind Cleves's words.
"He's telling me so that if anything happens to him, it would be because of his visit to Gehrman Sparrow. But if nothing happens to him, it means that his suspicions were incorrect, and there's no need to further disturb Gehrman Sparrow any further."
Elland stopped in his footsteps and said to the first mate beside him,
"Wait 15 minutes.
Thump, thump, thump. Klein and Danitz, who were on their way out, heard a rhythmic knock on the door. Danitz, who received a signal, hurried over and opened the door. It was Cleves outside. He looked at Danitz, who had disguised himself again, before turning to Klein and said,
Blazing Danitz?
At lunchtime, he had found Gehrman Sparrow's friend somewhat odd and familiar, but he hadn't connected the face to the picture on the bounty notice. It was only when Donna mentioned Danitz that the inspiration struck him, making him realize that the two were very similar.
As expected.
Klein was about to nod and answer when Danitz said with a laugh,
My friend, you have the wrong person. Although I look like the famous pirate who's worth 3,000 pounds, I'm really not him. People have always had misunderstandings, bringing me a great deal of trouble.
Klein raised his hand and covered his mouth. He almost laughed out loud and destroyed his persona. Maja ku afke. He restrained his expression and calmly replied,
Yes.
Sigh. My reputation.
Danitz stretched his neck and looked at the ceiling. Cleves drew in a silent breath and asked directly,
What are the two of you planning?
Klein jerked his chin towards Danitz.
Watching over him.
Watching over?
Cleves couldn't understand Gehrman Sparrow's words.
Sir, you must learn to make associations by yourself. Learn to infer on your own. You can't have me explain in detail. That doesn't match my persona.
Confronted with the doubtful look in Cleves's eyes, Klein casually said,
He boarded at Demir Harbor, and I recognized him, so I decided to watch over him to prevent any accidents.
After looking at Klein for a few seconds, Cleves nodded his head and said,
Will you be fine? Do you need any help?
No.
Klein replied quietly. Cleves glanced at the depressed Danitz and took a step back.
Then, I'll take my leave.
Just as he was about to leave, he was suddenly stopped by Gehrman Sparrow. He heard the mysterious young adventurer say, with some solemnity,
Return to the ship as soon as possible. There is danger dormant in Bansy Harbor.
In the Green Lemon restaurant, Donna had just laid out her napkin when she saw through the window that Uncle Cleves had arrived hurriedly downstairs. At this moment, the weather in the port suddenly changed. Strong gales rose up from all directions, causing the trees to sway back and forth.
As expected of Bansy Harbor, the Weather Museum.
Donna studied the outside scenery with interest. Cool. She saw a man in a black cloak trudging through the wind with a lantern in his hand. Seemingly sensing that he was being watched, that person turned his body sideways and looked up at the second floor of the restaurant. Then Donna discerned his appearance and saw that the area where the person's head was supposed to be was empty inside the black cloak. There was only a bare neck with bright red blood spewing out of it. The person slunk his body back down, pulled at his cloak before continuing forward. Chapter 507, Bansy Harbor in the Wind. Donna jerked back, her pupils constricting, her mouth half open as her scream reached her lips. If she hadn't seen the messenger before, then she would have long lost control of herself and staggered to her feet in terror, unconcerned whether she would flip over the tables or chairs. Fortunately, she was no longer the young lady who was completely ignorant of the matters of the sea when she first boarded the White Agate. Her voice had only become slightly sharper as she pointed outside the window and stammered,
There's a zombie. A headless zombie.
She used the most commonly seen zombie in folklore to describe the terrifying thing she had just seen. Cecile shot to her feet and rushed to Donna's side. She looked curiously out of the window where the raging wind was blowing and observed for a few seconds. She said truthfully,
There's nothing.
Donna shrank back, mustered her courage, and cautiously leaned forward, only to see the trees outside swaying, with random clutter flying everywhere. There wasn't a single pedestrian, Donna said while gesturing in an attempt to convince the adults in the room.
There really was someone there. He was wearing a black cloak, and he had no head. His neck was bleeding.
Her father, Erdy Branch, propped himself up from the table, went to the window, and looked out for a moment.
Donna, you aren't allowed to read that Fonse's Horror Stories anthology anymore tonight.
Donna felt aggrieved and wanted to defend herself. At this moment, Cleves came up to the 2th floor and approached. asking,
What happened?
The other bodyguard, Teague, explained with a chuckle.
Donna said she saw a zombie, a headless zombie.
Cleves was silent for 2 seconds. Then he nodded at Donna.
It's okay, this shall pass. The wind outside is very strong and dangerous. We'll leave when things calm down.
In the eyes of Donna, Uncle Cleves's words indicated that he believed her and had chosen the safest solution. But in the eyes of Erdy, Teague, and the others, this was merely a clumsy tactic to comfort a child. Seeing that Donna was still a little nervous and that his real employer wasn't too satisfied, Cleves pulled out a chair and sat down as he calmly said,
There's a strange tradition in Bansy Harbor. They don't leave the buildings or respond to any knocks on the door when the weather turns stormy at night.
Denton suddenly asked in enlightenment, having seen the messenger with his sister,
If you open the door, will you be taken away by the zombie?
Cleves picked up a glass of water and took a sip.
You can think of it that way.
So that's how it is. Donna calmed down, believing that she wouldn't encounter that horrible zombie as long as she didn't leave the restaurant. It was only then that she noticed that the surrounding customers had all cast their gazes over due to the commotion. Being stared at by so many people, Donna felt uncomfortable from head to toe. She instinctively wanted to lower her head to avoid everything.
I didn't do anything wrong. I really saw it.
Donna obstinately straightened her neck and looked around. She saw the gentlemen in tailcoats and the ladies in their beautiful dresses retract their gazes. She saw them lower their heads, pick up their spoons, and scoop the dark red blood blocks in their bowls to stuff into their mouths. Their lips were stained with a tinge of red. Their faces appeared pale under the light of the crystal chandelier. The contrast between the two made Donna feel an inexplicable sense of fear. She turned her head back and waited for dinner, secretly praying to the goddess that the gale would cease as soon as possible. Bansy Harbor Telegraph Office. As soon as Elland and his first mate finished sending their report to the Navy, they realized that the wind outside was howling and that the nearby doors and windows were rattling. Elland put on his boat-shaped hat and sighed with a laugh.
Really, the weather here is always so unstable.
His first mate, Harris, laughed out loud.
Otherwise, how could they call themselves the Weather Museum?
The telegraph office's staff, a young lady with curly brown hair, reminded them in a slow voice.
It's best if you don't head out. Legends say that you'll lose your head because of that.
Without a care, Harris opened the door to leave.
I know, but I've tried a few times and nothing happened.
Ellen stopped him and thought for a moment.
Will it be okay to go to the cathedral next door? Your telegraph office will be closing, right?
The lady with the curly brown hair was still as slow as ever.
No problem.
Ellen nodded, opened the telegraph office's door, and trudged toward the storm cathedral, dozens of meters away, against the gusts of wind that seemed to be capable of sweeping away a child. First Mate Harris, who was holding onto his hat, followed the captain as if to express his desire to rush directly back to the white agate. However, the moment he opened his mouth, strong gales gushed into his mouth, and his whole voice was miserably stuffed back into his mouth. After croaking for a while, he wisely shut his mouth and stopped making obviously unrealistic proposals. It was still 15 minutes to 7, and even in the evening the main doors of the Storm Cathedral were still open for its congregation. The gale weakened significantly when it reached the area. At the very least, Elland and Harris no longer had to worry about their hats abandoning them. Upon entering the cathedral, they walked down the dark and solemn aisle. They stepped into the prayer hall and saw a man in a dark blue priest robe sitting in the front pew. He was quietly gazing at the huge storm-sacred emblem made up of the symbols of the wind, waves, and lightning on the altar. Ellen smiled as he moved closer, patting the familiar figure on the shoulder.
Jace, where's your bishop?
With that pat, the priest's head wobbled. Then it fell forward, and with a loud thud, it fell to the ground, continuously rolling about. Blood gushed out of the priest's neck like a fountain, soaking Ellen's face. A cold and damp feeling reached his heart, and Ellen's eyes were blinded with a rich red color. All that was left in his line of sight was a world of blood, as well as a head that had finally stopped rolling and was staring upwards with a glazed look in its eyes. At 7:15 p.m., Klein and Danitz, who came out of the first-class restaurant, noticed that the wind which had been shaking the boat had calmed down considerably. After thinking for 2 seconds, Klein walked all the way to the entrance of the cabin and asked the crew,
"Who else isn't back?"
The crew member had seen this passenger enjoy the delicious Murloc meat with the captain, so he didn't hide anything as he said,
"Other than the Branch family and the Timothy family at the Green Lemon restaurant, all the other passengers have returned before the gale started. Heh, that place is quite far away, and it also takes quite a long time to dine there. Oh, right. Captain and First Mate went to the telegraph office, but they haven't returned yet."
Klein nodded indiscernibly and returned to room 312 in silence. He stood by the window, looking at the waves that were stirred by the wind. Even without using the mysterious space above the gray fog to divine, his own spiritual intuition made him vaguely sense that something bad was brewing and happening. After waiting another 5 minutes, he still didn't see Captain Elland and Donna's family return. Klein glanced sideways at Danitz, making the famous pirate slouching in the reclining chair sit up straight. Klein looked away, said nothing, and went into the washroom. He closed the door behind him, took out the paper figurine, disguised himself, and went above the gray fog, ready to make another divination. Before, he had considered the potential risks of Bansy Harbor, but now, after the wind had picked up, he intended to confirm the current level of danger.
Bansy Harbor is dangerous.
Klein held the spirit pendulum and began to recite the statement in a low voice. After repeating this over and over again, he opened his eyes and discovered that, although the topaz pendant was rotating clockwise, it wasn't spinning at a fast frequency or with large amplitudes.
There's danger, but it's within acceptable limits. This is in contradiction to the revelation from before.
Klein whispered to himself as he leaned his elbows on the edge of the long bronze table. He quickly thought of one possibility,
and that was that the current danger wasn't equal to the dormant danger. Only by triggering something or investigating it thoroughly would the iceberg hidden beneath the sea appear. This dormant danger might have existed for 300 or 400 years, or perhaps even longer, and not because of my arrival. The current danger might even have nothing to do with the dormant danger. It's a pity that I don't have the necessary information to make a divination based on this conjecture.
After interpreting, Klein quickly returned to the real world, left the washroom, and found a chair to sit on. He was silent, hesitant, and didn't move for a long time, which made Blazing Danitz feel strangely uneasy. Ever since Gehrman Sparrow mentioned that there was danger lurking in Bansy Harbor, this infamous pirate had been constantly worried.
To be able to make this monster change his mind and avoid the danger at Green Lemon Restaurant, it must be very terrifying. Why is my vacation so miserable? I'm plagued with bad luck.
The atmosphere was so stifling that Danitz had to get up and pace back and forth. It was then that he saw the monster, Gehrman Sparrow, suddenly stand up, button his double-breasted frock coat, and walk over to the coat rack by the door. After taking his silk hat, Klein looked at Blazing and said without any expression,
"You're free."
Danitz only found it surreal. He suddenly understood what the monster was thinking of doing, and he blurted out in shock,
You want to save the captain and those ordinary people? You were the one who said it's dangerous outside.
Klein put on his half-top hat, picked up his black wooden cane, twisted the door handle, and replied calmly,
They cooperated with me. They kept my secret from me. He treated me to Murloc meat. He helped me pay compensation for White Shark's loss.
Danitz didn't react for a moment. Subconsciously, he asked,
How much was the compensation?
Klein opened the door and walked out.
A few solely.
Madman! This fellow is completely mad. Be it his treatment to others or himself, He's a madman.
Danitz's mouth was half open as he felt speechless.
Luckily, I'm a normal person. I'll stay in a safe place.
Danitz retracted his gaze and thought in mockery and amusement. Just as this thought came to him, the wind howled again, rattling the windows and causing the candles in the room to flicker. Looking at this dark and turbulent scene, Danitz suddenly thought of a problem.
The ship is anchored in the harbor, which was also part of Bansy Harbor. It's not safe either, and it could also be in danger. If I were to stay here on my own, then I might as well follow that monster. At least. At least, he's very strong.
He ran out of room 312 and caught up with Klein just as he was about to leave the cabin. Klein turned his head to glance at him. Although he didn't say anything, his puzzlement was very evident. Danitz hurriedly laughed.
If I were to choose to retreat in the face of such trivial risks, I'll be mocked by all the pirates of the Sonia Sea.
An excuse.
Without exposing him, Klein borrowed a lantern from the crew. Carrying the dim yellow lantern and holding his hard wooden cane, he walked alongside the boat and entered the dim port in his black suit. As Danitz lamented, he followed closely beside him. Chapter 508. Don't Go Out. Unlike mainland cities such as Backland, Tingen, and Pritz Harbor, colonial islands such as Bansy Harbor lacked gas. The lamps lining the two sides of the street were sparse. They had candles caged in glass, waiting to be lit. Unfortunately, the wind had picked up early, so no one went out in the evening. The candles didn't shine at the predetermined time, and the road was pitch black. The faint outline of the crimson moon shone through the clouds. Compared to before, the wind was much calmer. At the very least, Klein didn't need to be distracted keeping his hat on. The thin fog gradually pervaded the air, and the doors and windows of the mainly two-story houses were shut tight. It was pitch black and devoid of any light, as though no one had lived in the area for a long time. With a yellow lantern in one hand and a hard wooden cane in the other, Klein walked quickly down the quiet street in the direction of the Green Lemon restaurant, which blazing Danitz had pointed out. Whoosh! Amidst the fog, the wind began to swirl as Klein felt a baffling chill down his neck. He lifted his right hand, which held the cane, and propped up the collar of his double-breasted frock coat, completely covering his neck. It was at this moment that a scene suddenly appeared in his mind. In the scene, a black shadow the size of a watermelon appeared from the fog and lunged for his ear. Without thinking, Klein swung his arm and forearm and struck out with his cane. Bam! Just as the black shadow came close, it was struck head-on and sent flying a long distance away. With the help of the lantern's light, Klein finally recognized the thing that had attacked him. It was a head. It was a head that had lost its body, a head that had its esophagus hanging down. The head floated in midair, its face resembling dried cheese with mildew all over it. There was a yellowish-green liquid flowing down its skin as it outlined the face's contours. There were only 2 black holes left where its nose was supposed to be. Its bulging eyes were mostly white without much black. Its lips were mostly rotten, revealing sharpened teeth mixed with blood. Blazing Danitz silently cursed when he saw this scene, his heart trembling.
Dogsh asterisk T.
Even though he had embarked on many treasure hunts and had fought many monsters, such a disgusting and horrifying thing was still rare. At some point in time, a classic revolver had appeared in his hand, and he was about to fire it with his elbow held down. At this moment, he saw a pure ray of light descend from the sky, landing on the somewhat stiff head. Ah! A blood-curdling screech rang out, and the shriveled and hideous head was quickly vaporized before dissolving into ashes. It didn't leave a single trace behind. Danitz subconsciously commented,
How weak! Is this monster Gehrman Sparrow from the Sun Pathway? Doesn't look like it. He likely relied on what should be some sort of mystical item. I didn't even realize it just now, but Gehrman Sparrow had already discovered the enemy and attacked. He really is very strong.
Danitz quickly turned his attention to something else. Just as his thoughts were settling down, he saw a similar head fly out from the fog to his side, from the corner of his eye. It was trying to bite his neck. Bang! Danitz calmly pulled the trigger. The brass bullet accurately hit the head covered in mold, shattering the head's glabella as it fell backwards and stopped in midair. Soon after, a crimson ball quickly expanded above Danitz's empty left palm, and a fiery light began to swirl. He leaned forward and dragged his arm before throwing the fireball, causing it to crash into the stiff head. Flames soared up as the head burned red. The skin on the head quickly charred, emitting a sizzling sound. However, it lunged forward with its mouth wide open, ready to bite Danitz's neck as though it wasn't affected. This turn of events was somewhat out of Danitz's expectations. He nearly failed to dodge in time, and he hurriedly rolled forward, barely dodging fatal damage. A bright scarlet color appeared on his left palm once again, but the flame didn't expand this time. Instead, it shrunk, layer by layer. Within 1 second, Danitz threw out the orange fireball, which was only the size of one eye, while dodging. The fireball was controlled by his spirituality. It drew an arc in the air and accurately flew into the mouth of the shriveled head. Boom! The fiery light flashed, and the explosion splintered the flying head from the inside out. Countless pieces of it, along with its blood, splashed everywhere. Danitz rolled to his feet and breathed a sigh of relief. He thought,
"I've finally finished it."
Only then did he realize that this monster, which only had a head, wasn't easy to deal with. Yet, Gehrman Sparrow had killed one with ease. Danitz added scornfully in his heart,
"It's mainly because the Beyonder powers in the Sun domain restrain such things."
As he thought of this, he turned his head to the side and realized that Gehrman Sparrow hadn't waited for him. With his cane and lantern, he was jogging into the distance, his black coat fluttering behind him slightly.
Dog *T. Wait for me. Wait for me.
Danitz's pupils contracted as he widened his pace to chase after the man. He didn't dare to stay on his own in the thin fog and dim surroundings. Inside the Green Lemon restaurant, Donna looked at the white porcelain bowl in front of her and the dark red blood cakes in it. She thought of the strange horror she felt when seeing the customers eating just now, as well as the blood oozing out of the headless cloaked man's neck. Her throat moved and she almost vomited. Donna decided to give up the delicacy, even though the fragrance had already seeped into her nose. She ate some salad and mashed potatoes without much thought and waited for the wind outside to die down. She felt the clock on the wall moving ever so slowly. Time passed by the second. The customers at the table paid their bills and left the second floor. The second floor became quieter and quieter as it turned emptier and emptier. Thud! 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 Donna felt that the sound of feet on the wooden steps as they descended were frustrating. Finally, she noticed that the trees outside were no longer swaying, and the ground was littered with all sorts of junk.
The wind has stopped,
Donna said, pointing excitedly to the window. Her father, an import and export merchant, Branch, pinched his forehead and growled.
"Where's your table manners, Donna?"
Just as Donna was about to argue, Cleves raised his palm and pressed it down.
But it's 7:40 p.m. and we're almost done with dinner. Let's head back as soon as possible. There are many nasty legends about the night in Bansy Harbor.
Every merchant who depended on the sea for a living was more or less superstitious, especially when it came to the legends of the natives. Therefore, fell silent and agreed with Cleves' suggestion. He quickly foot the bill and led his family and bodyguards down to the first floor. Cleves was about to open the door to find his way when a creaking sound came from a nearby room. Donna almost screamed out in fright and gripped Denton's hand tightly. A figure walked out, glanced at them, and calmly said,
"It's fogged up. It's best not to go out."
The figure wore a black tailcoat without a hat. There was a pair of glasses on the bridge of his nose. His face was fleshy and almost circular. Cleves recognized him to be the owner of the Green Lemon restaurant and asked,
"What are you trying to convey, Mr. Fox?"
Fox said without much of an expression,
"In Bansy, during the nights when the fog and weather drastically changes, It's best not to go out or respond to any knockings. Otherwise, one might encounter bad things.
The more Donna listened, the more scared she became. She loudly emphasized.
People have already left ahead of us.
Fox pointed to the rooms on the first floor.
They chose to stay.
Creak! Thud! As soon as Fox's voice fell, the doors to the various rooms opened either softly or heavily. The gentlemen and ladies from before came to the doors and quietly watched Donna and her family, who were considering to leave. Branch said in deliberation,
Perhaps we should respect the customs here. Staying a night here won't affect our boarding of the ship.
According to the experience Cleves was equipped with, he should have followed Fox's advice and stayed at the Green Lemon restaurant, but he remembered Gehrman Sparrow's reminder. It was a reminder of a powerful adventurer who was watching Blazing Dannets. He quickly made his decision and thought,
There is danger dormant in Bansy Harbor. It doesn't refer to it being indoors or outdoors.
Cleves said to
Mr. Branch, please trust in my profession.
Another bodyguard agreed.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of folklore, but none of them are pragmatic.
Before he finished his sentence, knocking sounds came from the restaurant's door, and a series of screams could be heard from afar. Fox said slowly,
Look, there are knocking sounds. Don't respond.
Ertie's heart palpitated as he was about to choose to stay the night. Donna looked at the gentlemen and ladies standing at their doorways, and she felt that their gazes looked abnormally weird. The young lady stressed, almost screaming.
No, we have to return.
Cleves could also feel the indescribable pressure and the coldness that seeped through his bones, and he once again stressed his opinion.
If there are any problems, then it'll be more dangerous staying here. There are cannons on the ship, as well as sailors with guns and sabers.
This reason convinced Ertie, who motioned for Cleves to open the door. Cleves waited for the knocking to subside, then with one hand holding a gun, he pulled open the door with the other. The wind's howling had quietened, and the darkness was deep amidst the spreading fog. It was as if there were many monsters hidden within. Donna held her younger brother, Denton, and, hiding behind Cecile, left the restaurant one step at a time. Creak! The door to the restaurant suddenly closed, preventing them from returning. At this moment, they were like ships stranded in a storm, as though they were the only ones left in this world. With the lantern in hand, Cleves walked in front when he suddenly saw something fly over and crash into the ground, rolling a few times. Donna and the others subconsciously looked over and immediately let out cries of terror. It was a shriveled, rotting head. Then they saw light. Light fell from the sky, and the disgusting head melted into nothingness. Ertie and the others swallowed hard, their bodies trembling. Ertie said,
This.
At that moment they saw a faint yellow light approaching from the depths of the fog. It was a figure holding a lantern, wearing a half-top hat and a double-breasted frock coat which shared the same color as the night. The lines of his face were distinct, and there was an obvious sharpness in the coldness.
Uncle Sparrow.
Uncle Sparrow.
Donna and Denton cried out. They felt their hearts settle down. Klein tossed the lantern to Dannets beside him, and he walked over with his cane in hand before calmly saying to Cleves and the others, as if nothing was out of the ordinary,
Let's go to the telegraph office first. What about the Timothys?
Chapter 509. Request.
Timothys?
Branch subconsciously replied,
They're still in the restaurant.
He then pointed to the area where the moldy head had been purified and anxiously asked,
What was that just now?
Maintaining Gehrman Sparrow's persona, Klein didn't answer and glanced at Dannets before walking directly past Donna's family to the tightly closed door of the Green Lemon restaurant. Blazing Dannets held his lantern and was relieved, having finally completed a goal. He straightened his back, looked at Ertie and the others, and scoffed.
You don't have to worry about what that was. Just know that it's a monster that will harm you.
If Gehrman Sparrow wasn't only a few meters away, he even wanted to proclaim,
Only I, Lord Blazing Danitz, can protect you.
Cleves exchanged glances with Cecile and Teague before taking the initiative to step forward. He comforted his employers and said,
"Leave your questions to after we get back to the White Agate."
Frankly speaking, the three bodyguards had all been adventurers for varying periods of time. However, their understanding of monsters was still stuck at the level of folklore or stories of their drunken peers. They still found it rather surreal, as though they were in a dream. However, since they had seen creatures like murlocs before, it wasn't that hard to accept other things. At most, they were a little weirder and uglier than murlocs. When they thought of this, their hearts calmed significantly, and the guns in their hands seemed to regain their strength. However, the pure light that descended from the sky still exceeded their scope of understanding. They only felt that their worldview, outlook on life, and values that had long been formed had begun wavering. All they could do was temporarily ignore it, suppressing all their emotions to the bottom of their hearts. Klein stopped at the door of the Green Lemon restaurant, raised his right hand, and tapped it with his fingers. Thump, thump, thump. After he knocked 3 times in a rhythmic fashion, no one answered, and there was silence. If not for the candlelight shining through the windows and the cracks in the door, Klein would have thought it was an empty building that had long been abandoned. Thump, thump, thump! He knocked 3 more times. Within the restaurant, the silence continued. Everyone seemed to be abiding by the custom of not responding to any knocking in foggy weather. Klein retracted his right hand and patted the hem of his double-breasted frock coat. Suddenly, he leaned back, lifted his knees, and kicked his right foot forward. With a bang, the restaurant's door suddenly opened wide, and all the nails that had fixed the copper lock popped out. Wearing a tailcoat, the boss, Fox, with his pudgy, nearly round face, was still standing in his original position. The ladies and gentlemen who had chosen to stay the night all opened the doors one by one and stood quietly at the door, looking over without a word.
What do you want?
Fox didn't flare up, his tone the same as before. However, he had a revolver in his hand. With his spirit vision activated, Klein turned his head and looked around. He didn't find any traces of evil on any of the humans present. His gaze landed on the boss of the restaurant, and his gaze turned heavy. He looked into the owner's eyes and asked,
"Where's the Timothy family?"
Fox repressed his emotions, as though a storm was brewing in his dark brown eyes while he looked at the man for 2 seconds. Finally, he unnaturally turned his head and said,
"There's another table. Foreigners. Upstairs."
Klein ordered coldly,
"Get them to come down."
Fox was silent for a few seconds until the man quickly drew his gun and aimed it at his head. He took a deep breath and sent a waiter up to the 2nd floor, leading the Timothy family down the stairs.
What happened?
Timothy was a man who was more than 30 years of age. He was on vacation with his newly wedded wife. Klein lowered his gun and flatly said,
"Something unexpected has happened in Bansy Harbor. Are you coming back with me to the ship or staying here?"
While Timothy ruminated over the words, he saw Ertie Branch outside, nodding at him solemnly.
Something unexpected?
He knew that the other party was a very rich import and export merchant who had 3 bodyguards with him. He believed that if there were any unexpected circumstances, then it would be safer to stay with them, so the answer was obvious. As for the unique customs of Bansy Harbor, it was just a custom. He held his wife's hand and walked towards the door, politely smiling as he said,
"All our things are on the ship. Of course we'll stick with you."
He and his new wife expressed their gratitude in unison, walked past Klein, and joined with the Branch family outside.
"Thank you."
"Thank you."
Klein withdrew his revolver, politely bowed at Fox, and said,
"Excuse us."
With that, he turned around and walked towards Cleves and Company, who were illuminated by the light leaking out from the restaurant. With a thud, the door of the Green Lemon restaurant closed once again, swaying slightly in the wind. Klein had actually noticed an unusual, subtle atmosphere just now, but since his spirit vision failed to obtain anything, he didn't wish to investigate it too deeply, lest he ignite the huge danger lurking in Bansy Harbor. He returned to Danitz's side and did a head count with the light of the lantern.
Donna's family of 4, their 3 bodyguards, the Timothy couple, and several servants are all present.
Klein switched the hands in which he held his revolver and cane with, lifted his gun-wielding right hand, slipped it deep into the double-breasted frock coat, and rubbed the sun brooch. With a flash of dark golden light, an invisible force quickly spread outwards, flooding everyone present like a wave. Instantly, Donna and the others felt as if they had arrived in the south, like they were bathing in warm sunlight that dispersed the cold chill within their bodies. They were no longer as nervous and worried as if they had found their courage again. The remnant black colors obtained from the special cured meat from Demir Harbor quickly disappeared, along with the extremely minute amounts of wicked feelings. Sun Halo was able to enhance the courage of one's companions within a 20-meter radius and purify any evil forces within them. With the help of the brooch and while under the control of Klein's spirituality and psyche, he could use the power of the sun to bypass any targets he didn't wish to help. Klein repeated himself as he held his cane in his left hand and his revolver in his right.
Let's head to the telegraph office first.
After getting his bearings, he proceeded forward. Danitz followed his directions and walked diagonally to the side. Cleves, Cecile, and Teague very professionally took charge of security for the other 2 flanks.
With a party of more than 15 people, it's easy for us to suffer losses once we're attacked. Moreover, only Blazing can truly be considered a helper. What should I do?
Thinking back to the monsters he had encountered, Klein suddenly slipped the revolver back into his underarm holster and handed the cane to his right palm. He reached into his pocket with his left hand and removed the wall of spirituality around an iron cigar case. He took out Azik's copper whistle and held it in his hand, occasionally tossing it up. He believed that such an action would divert the attention of the undead monsters, which only had one head left from the others, leaving the copper, ancient whistle as the only thing in their eyes.
This way, I don't have to worry about not being able to rescue them in time. That's the effect of an MT.
Klein sighed and quickened his pace. At this moment, 3 shriveled heads covered in mold flew out from the thin fog in front of him. They charged towards Klein from different directions like arrows, completely ignoring the existence of the other delicious meat.
3.
Danitz's pupils contracted, a little worried that German Sparrow would end up flustered, but he also looked forward to seeing his true strength.
3.
Klein calmly shook his left hand and threw Azik's whistle into the air. The heads with esophaguses hanging down from them immediately drew an arc and headed for their primary target. Klein took a step back and, without any expression, raised his hand and squeezed the sun brooch. All of a sudden, dense golden flames were produced where the copper whistle was as a holy aura was emanated. Fire of light. The 3 skinny heads let out miserable shrieks at the same time, turning into dust under the golden light. Klein took 2 steps forward and reached out to catch Azik's copper whistle.
That can actually work. Another mystical item?
Danitz froze for 2 seconds, flabbergasted at how easily the assault had been resolved. At that moment, Timothy and his wife also clearly saw what the things which were attacking them looked like. One of them turned pale from fright while the other asked, flustered.
What was that?
Donna immediately turned around and nodded seriously.
Leave your questions to after we get back to the white agate.
With that said, she put her finger to her lips, mimicking Uncle Sparrow's meaning of silence. Remembering the holy aura displayed by the young man in front of him, Timothy swallowed hard and pulled at his wife's hand. He fell silent while remaining alert, and his servants had no choice but to obey upon seeing this. The group continued on through the moonlit streets. The lights of the houses on either side of the streets were extinguished, leaving only darkness behind the oriel windows. Donna felt as if pairs of eyes were following her and the others, but for some reason no one showed up.
They must all be afraid of Uncle Sparrow.
She held her brother's hand tight and walked amidst the protective circle of her parents. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the side of the street. He wore a black cloak and leaned forward, revealing a neck that was still bleeding. There was nothing above the neck, with the interior of the cloak reflecting the moonlight. Gasp! The headless figure let out a beast-like growl that sounded like gasping as it rushed towards Klein, stomping on the street to the point that the ground slightly shook. A spot it passed by just happened to be in Donitz's path. This infamous pirate cursed and flung an orange-yellow fireball, which had been repeatedly compressed from his hand. Boom! The fireball exploded, causing the headless man to retreat several steps. His clothes were tattered, and his skin quickly charred while his cloak was set on fire. However, to the monsters that had already lost their lives, this wasn't a serious injury. And in that instant, with a crisp crack, the scarlet flame on the black cloak suddenly soared into the air, as if it were blooming. Klein, in his coat, jumped out of the flames, borrowing the momentum from his fall and his own strength in order to stab the cane he held in both hands directly into the headless man's neck. Splat! The cane sank into the headless man's body and emerged from his crotch. Bam! Klein's back muscles bulged, forcefully throwing the headless monster to the ground. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he stood behind the monster and continued to grip the cane tightly while he poured his spirituality into the sunbrooch. He had already used his spirit vision to determine that Holy Light Summoning, Cleave of Purification, and Fire of Light were all unable to deal with this blackish-green monster in a short amount of time, so he could only use another method. 5 seconds, 4 seconds, 3 seconds. The headless man struggled with all his might, but like a snake, he fell to his knees and was firmly nailed to the ground by the cane. 2 seconds, 1 second. Klein opened his mouth and spat out a word in ancient Hermes.
Son!
Sizzle! When the blackish-green gas was emitted, Klein let go of his cane and took 2 steps to the side. Within the sparse rain, the headless man continuously twitched before finally calming down, eventually melting into a pool of blood.
No beyonder characteristics. This means it's not the real enemy. At most, it can be considered as a created servant.
Klein withdrew his cane, turned, and walked back to the group.
So cool!
Denton let out a belated cheer. Donna's eyes sparkled.
He was still borrowing the powers of a mystical item. However, his phasing away during the flames has indicated his true strength. He really isn't easy to deal with.
Blazing Danitz retracted his gaze, feeling that his decision not to mindlessly run off had been extremely wise. 7 or 8 minutes later, the group that cleared out 2 more waves of monsters arrived at the Bansy Port's telegraph office. Cleves took the initiative and knocked on the door. A gentle female voice came from inside.
Who is it?
Cleves answered through the door.
We're looking for the captain of the White Agate, Mr. Elland.
In the quiet night, the woman's voice spoke at a moderate pace.
He and his first mate went next door to the cathedral.
The person speaking sounds odd, or is she like that only on similar nights?
Klein flicked a gold coin and confirmed that she wasn't lying. As they were preparing to leave, the female voice in the telegraph office hesitated and said,
Can you guys help me take note of someone? He's my colleague. He went out before the wind started tonight and never came back. His name is Pavo Court.
Chapter 510, The Returning Bishop. Pavo Court. Cleves didn't directly answer the woman behind the telegraph office's door. He turned to glance at Gehrman Sparrow, waiting for his decision. In the eyes of this former adventurer, it was a difficult task for 15 people to get back to the White Agate safely. They couldn't and shouldn't be distracted by helping her search for someone. However, he was well aware that the current pillar of support was Gehrman Sparrow and Blazing Danitz. They were the only ones who had the right to decide on the matter. Lestro. Klein remained silent for 2 seconds. Then he spoke in a measured voice.
What does he look like?
He believed that having more information would help him escape this strange, foggy city, so he casually asked in passing. As for whether he would help take note of the person's whereabouts, it all depended on what happened next. While inquiring, Klein also warned himself not to pursue the matter too deeply, or else it might risk triggering the danger dormant in Bansy Harbor. Between understanding the situation and avoiding the risks, he had to engage in a balancing act, no more, no less, without leaning too far left or right. This might be an easy or difficult feat, because no one knew what would happen once he took the step. He could only judge based on his experience and intuition, and he could fall into a pit at any time. This left Klein highly stressed as his mind whirled at an unprecedented speed. In the dense darkness and thin fog, the telegraph office's door remained tightly shut. The woman inside paused and said,
"He's a very handsome man. Anna says he has 2 eyes, 2 ears, a nose, and a mouth."
Why does this answer sound so scary? Is there something wrong with this woman? According to the customs of Bansy Harbor, she shouldn't have even responded.
Blazing Danitz had the urge to kick open the door, rush into the telegraph office, and check the situation inside. It was at this moment that he saw Gehrman Sparrow put his hand on his hat and turn to the side.
Storm Cathedral.
Klein briefly stated their destination. He didn't bother with whether there was anything wrong with the woman at the telegraph office. It was just like how he didn't delve into the secrets of the owner of the Green Lemon restaurant or the customers who had chosen to stay the night. The wind was getting lighter, and the fog was thinning. The candlelight from the cathedral was shining through the narrow windows high above, like a beacon in a storm. After Klein used Sun Halo again, Donna and the others regained some of their courage, like people who had fallen into the water and desperately grabbed onto the last straw. They hurriedly walked on the empty streets in silence. Soon they arrived outside the Storm Cathedral, but the doors were shut tight. Glancing at the storm-sacred emblem on the door, Klein raised his hand and knocked 3 times. Thump, thump, thump. A vigilant male voice immediately came from behind the door.
"Who is it?"
Gehrman Sparrow.
Klein replied straight away. He could already tell that it was Captain Elland.
"Why are you here?"
Elland asked again without opening the door. Klein raised his cane and calmly said,
"You helped me pay White Shark's compensation."
After a moment of surprise and amusement, Elland made an initial confirmation that it was the real Gehrman Sparrow outside. At the very least, even a monster adept at disguising wouldn't have known something that was privy only to the 2 of them. He still felt hesitant until Cleves, Erdy Branch, Donna, and company sounded out in succession. Only then did he relax and allow his first mate Harris to unlock and open the door. A heavy, clunking sound rang out, and Klein saw Elland in his boat-shaped hat, sword in one hand and musket in the other.
"Something happened here, too,"
he keenly asked, based on his conclusion from the situations from before. Elland stepped aside to let Donna and the others in. Then he pointed at the prayer hall and said,
"The priest I knew, JC, died in there. He was decapitated, and Bishop Millet is nowhere to be found. Same for the other priests. Also, the servants in the church are all gone."
A dead priest with a missing bishop? The whole cathedral is devoid of the living? This is a little problematic.
Klein gripped the cold Azek's copper whistle, his heart sinking. Of course, he was very clear that the priest and the bishop weren't the main force of the Church of Storm that managed Beyonder matters in Bansy Harbor. Underneath this cathedral, there was definitely a mandated Punisher team formed out of 6 to 8 Beyonders, as well as an indefinite number of sealed artifacts. Even high-sequence Beyonders wouldn't be able to wipe out this force in a short span of time without causing a stir.
As long as they're alive and able to use sealed artifacts, the problem shouldn't be too terrible. So at this point in time, what is the mandated Punisher team doing?
Based on his previous experience as a Nighthawk, Klein made a guess of the standard operating procedures. In the process, he followed Elland to the prayer hall and examined the body of the deceased priest. Jace died a tragic death, as if his head had been decapitated while he was still alive. Unlike the monsters outside, his esophagus and head were separated. With Klein's spirit vision, this priest no longer had any remnant spirit. It would be very difficult to have a successful spirit channeling ritual.
Is it due to a unique killing technique, or has it been dealt with accordingly? It's different from the monsters outside. Was it because the operation happened in a rush?
Combining all that he knew, Klein concluded his previous speculation. He felt that there were 2 possibilities. 1, there was something of local origins, perhaps a living sealed artifact or a mid-sequence Beyonder, who had lost control underground. It escaped the cathedral and killed Jace while fleeing, causing the abnormal changes in Bansy Harbor. The bishop, priests, and mandated punishers were in desperate pursuit, attempting to form a seal again or get rid of the perpetrator. The servants had been led underground and were under the protection of the remaining mandated punishers. But this didn't explain the strange behavior of the residents of Bansy Harbor. The second possibility was that the primitive sacrificial ritual to the god of weather had been resurrected in a number of people in Bansy Harbor, and that the flying heads and headless monsters were in adherence with the descriptions of flesh and blood consumption in the sacrificial rituals and the burying of heads in the altar. And due to some unknown reason, this group of people had raided the cathedral and killed Reverend Jess. The rest of the population had more or less understood the situation, but they had opted for silence.
They might have already assaulted the area underground and are currently engaged in an intense battle with the mandated punishers, priests, and the bishop, who are aided by sealed artifacts. They might have transformed all the servants into monsters or thrown them out. It can also be that they're under pursuit from the Beyonders of the Church of Storms, and the servants have been sent underground to receive protection to prevent any accidents. From the fact that Jace's corpse hasn't been used, there's a possibility that it's the latter development. If I were to head underground to confirm the situation, I'll definitely be attacked since we're unfamiliar Beyonders. Besides, the remnant strength might not be sufficient.
Klein looked at the priest on the ground and realized that his Beyonder characteristic had condensed into a blue sapphire by his neck. He retracted his gaze and didn't pick up the item. He didn't want to attract the violent retaliation from the short-tempered Church of Storms, so he turned to Elend and Harris.
Let's return to the ship first.
He casually tossed the gold coin and confirmed that there was no battle currently going on underground. In any case, regardless of whether there were any mandated punishers present, the cathedral grounds were no longer suitable for prolonged stays. After all, Klein wasn't sure if his guess was right, and he could only make the safest choice.
All right.
Elend had no desire to stay here either, being in a situation where he waited nervously for any changes to befall him. As long as he returned to the White Agate, he would have many cannons and many sailors that could withstand accidents to a certain extent. After a short rest, the group left the cathedral. With the addition of Elend and Harris, the team's defense clearly became much tighter. Klein no longer needed to toss the copper whistle to attract the monsters, so he stuffed it back into his pocket.
Shall we send a telegram to the Church of Storms' headquarters to report on Bansy Harbor?
After a few steps, Elend made a cautious suggestion. This way, even if there were major unforeseen events, as long as they held on, they would eventually be saved. So, Toma. Klein didn't object. Walking through the thin fog ahead of him, he calmly said,
"We'll pass by the telegraph office."
"Phew!" Blazing Danitz breathed a sigh of relief. Then his heart skipped a beat. He was afraid that the Church of Storms would perform investigations and discover that an infamous pirate had played an important role in this matter, and by then he would probably still be trapped on the White Agate.
Although I saved people, the mandated punishers aren't friendly to those who don't belong to them, especially when I'm a pirate.
Stumped for a moment, Danitz decided to get over the immediate danger before considering other matters. After walking for a while, they saw the telegraph office in sight. A faint yellow light suddenly emerged from the side street and approached them from the depths of the fog. It was a middle-aged man carrying a hurricane lamp. He wore a dark blue bishop robe embroidered with the symbol of the storm. His head was bowed and his face was pale. He was wheezing as he staggered while walking.
"Bishop Millet?"
Elend focused and blurted out. The middle-aged man looked up, raised his hurricane lamp, and said,
"Elend, is it?"
At this moment, Klein took a step back, letting Elend stand out. He didn't wish for the bishop of the Church of Storms to pay notice to him. Danitz even shrunk his neck back, using Erdy's plump body to block himself.
"Yes, Your Excellency. Jace is dead. What happened?"
Elend wasn't a novice, so he didn't directly step forward. Bishop Millet coughed and said,
"An old custom has been revived, and a group of heathens with dirty blood running through their veins are beginning to offer live sacrifices and are consuming their flesh and blood. Jason noticed that they were problematic and ended up being killed by them. The matter can no longer be covered up. They used the sacrificial ritual to change the weather and tried to attack the cathedral. They were defeated by the mandated Punisher and fled to the mountain. They escaped to the cave where the altar is. I was injured in combat. Without being able to hold out much longer, all I could do was slowly make my way back.
Just as he finished speaking, a bright ball of light burst out of the distant fog, as if countless bolts of lightning were striking down. With the help of this light, Klein and the others could see the fog-covered mountain range by the shore, as well as the peak which was connected to thunderstorms. To a certain extent, this confirmed Bishop Millet's claim. Elend was about to step forward to support the Storm Bishop when he saw Gehrman Sparrow take out a gold coin and mutter in a low voice,
"He has ill intentions."
Ding! The gold coin flew up and then tumbled in the air before landing in Klein's palm, heads facing up. It meant a positive result. Bishop Millet stared straight at this scene, his light brown eyes suddenly flashing with a dark red light.